Hi everybody, I'm Tony E at ShowIP Interface Brief, and today is day 39. Day 39 of the journey, and today was a really good day. I am continuing on the QoS path, and I actually didn't do some QoS labs, but rather, so I don't know if I consider this day labbing. Well, wait a second, I did lab, and I'll get to that. But I did some study, some self-study. I found this really awesome website that's really breaking down QoS for me. And let me tell you what, I've mentioned before, I don't do QoS on a regular basis at all. Or how about this? I've never done QoS in production. Only in lab scenarios and only the little bit that I've done so far. So anyhow, one of the barriers to learning QoS, one of the things that makes it seem more complicated than it is the vocabulary that goes along with it. There are so many new terms to learn right out of the gate. There are so many, there's like 20 new terms you have to learn just to be entry into the world of QoS. Whereas you don't necessarily have that barrier when you're moving from, when you're learning routing protocols, for example. A neighbor is a neighbor, an adjacency is an adjacency. As you start off in your studies, you go from RIP to EIGRP to OSPF to BGP. You're using the similar vocabulary throughout, but this is brand new vocabulary, and that's what makes it such a mountain to climb, such a nightmare for me. Is getting over that vocabulary. Anyhow, I found this great site that sort of breaks down some of these concepts and things about QoS. And what I started doing is just making handwritten notes. Look, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sheets so far of handwritten notes on QoS, and they all came from this website. I mean, yes, I could have just printed it, okay? But then would I have actually remembered any of it if I had just printed it? No. So I wanted to do some handwritten notes. I wanted to summarize the information that I was reading. I wanted to make sure I understood it. And then what I'll do is I'll review my own notes and use that for study. It's something that I did as I was working on the CCIE written. Now, I didn't ace the CCIE written, so I don't say that I have some hidden method on studying by going back old school, but I made old school flashcards, actual flippin' flashcards, and with front and backs. And I preferred to study that way because it made me develop my own study material, which helped me to absorb it a little bit better than just Wax Tracks, a Jedediah Casey. He went and provided the community with an awesome set of flashcards. I have it on my phone still, and that was great for me testing some knowledge, but I learned more by making my own study material. So that's what I'm doing with QoS. And I've always said, after I get through this CCIE journey, I would love to circle back around and be able to give back to the community by way of providing some study materials. We're sort of breaking down some of these barrier to entry on some of these technologies like QoS. So we'll see how that goes. I definitely would like to. But there are things like, first in, first out, queuing. First of all, it's classification, marking, congestion management, traffic metering, link efficiency, traffic shaping, and policing. Those are all these categories. Then within those categories is how I write my notes. Congestion management comes down to different queuing strategies: first in, first out, priority queuing, custom queuing, weighted fair queuing, class-based weighted fair queuing, low latency queuing. It's just there are, and then inside of there are even more vocabulary words. So it's just nested vocabulary words, and on top of it, it's nested theory, and then once you get into the command line, it's nested configuration. So there really is a lot to learn, and I did not mind at all taking the time to read the material and make myself some handwritten notes. I'll show the website here. It's a pretty good website. I've really enjoyed this one. It is very texty, but it has a couple of sort of old school black and white images, definitely not as modern as some of the modern websites. But this information is great, and although these images look old, they're really relevant. And even down here at the bottom is a little Q&A section where there are some summary questions with answers. I think that's really cool. This site is docwiki.cisco.com, and actually I've referenced this a couple of times throughout my studies, and for different technologies, different topics, and I really have just sort of used it for our quick reference. But this whole site here, this page, has been really good so far. So I'm about halfway through it. Where am I? Flow-based weighted fair queuing. Yeah, I'm about halfway through it, almost halfway. And I have 5 pages of notes, and I'm almost halfway. So there's a lot of good material on here. It doesn't get into configuration. This is all theory and vocabulary, and that's what I want to start with. Theory, then configuration, then validation. That's my study method for any topology. Theory, configuration, validation. Okay, so that's what I did today, and for this evening, and I've really enjoyed it. I've mentioned before I have a real problem with sort of reading comprehension, and I don't do basic studying well. I can't sit down and read a book and absorb it and memorize it. So it's a real challenge for me to do that. And so I feel very good about myself when I'm able to sit down and just focus on written material or text-based material. And that's what I did tonight, so I felt really good about it. I actually learned a little bit, so I'd like to continue reviewing, make some more notes, and then review my own notes, and then get into configuration. So if anyone has any good links or resources for QoS, I definitely want them. Send them over. Leave it in the comments below, or join us over on the Discord channel. There's a link, a 24-hour link that you can use in the description below for this video, as well as a link to this site. The site that I just showed is in the description below. On top of that, I was trolling on Twitter for a little while, and first of all, I was on Twitter for a little bit, and one of our Twitter friends at Cisco Panther, Ernest, had gave me @mention that said he had configured DMVPN and couldn't figure out why he's not seeing the routes. And so I did a little back and forth on Twitter, some quick troubleshooting, asked him to paste his configs over on Pastebin and share them. So I went ahead and took a look at them. And I think what I want to do is sort of quickly go through my strategy on sort of troubleshooting his topology, because I built it. And troubleshooting his topology, and then ultimately what I found the problem to be, because I think it's a neat problem. It's fairly simple. Everything is simple once you discover what it is, and everything's hard when you don't know what it is. So this started out being hard and ended up being simple. Let's dive into a little lab and take a look. I already have it configured here. So here was the original post from Ernest over here at Cisco Panther. Help, I implemented DMVPN on a hub and 2 spokes. The multi-point GRE is working fine. EIGRP adjacency is up between the spokes and hub, but the local network on the routers are not being advertised into EIGRP as configured. And so I did a quick thing. Can the hub see? I immediately thought this was going to be a split horizon problem. He says no. He turned off split horizon, and I said, are you sure you're seeing a neighbor? Do you show DMVPN? And I said, go ahead and paste the configs on Pastebin. So he did, and here's the configs here on Pastebin. This is the hub, config for the hub, and config for the 2 spokes. So I went ahead and copied out this, and I'm using my topology here, which I call the 6-shooter. Anyone who's watched my video series knows when I build my own labs, I use this topology just because it's pre-built and it's flexible and I can do anything with it. I'm building his topology in this physical topology. It completely doesn't match what he's doing, but the logical paths are exactly the same. I'm able to emulate his configurations perfectly. So I went ahead and configured my interfaces to match his. So for example, I have router 1 show IP interface brief. So I'm matching my interface here, and I'm also simulating a backend interface, like a local LAN interface. This would be my WAN interface facing the non-broadcast multi-access network, and then this is my tunnel interface. And so that's router 1, and we have router 2 and router 3 all participating in DMVPN. So I'll just arrange these windows, have them all up here so we can all see. Just show the interfaces to show that, you know, I have a similar or like configuration. So I went ahead and just grabbed his configuration straight out of here, grabbed his tunnel interface, and I threw it in a notepad, which is here. So this is his hub. So when I looked over the running configuration, I said, you know what, this looks good. Even before I labbed it up, I looked at the running config and I said, you know what, this looks good. I don't see any problem with it. And I said, you know what, I'm not sure. Let me lab it up and see what I find. So I started off by configuring my non-broadcast multi-access. I made sure they all had reachability. Then I configured my tunnel interfaces. I used his exact one. I just changed out the source interface for my interface, and that was it. Pasted it right in. And what I have is a working DMVPN. So our router 1 is our hub, and we have 2 spokes here. They've been dynamically learned. And again, this is statically configured, so I'm a spoke statically configuring pointing to the hub and show DMVPN. Okay, so that was no problem. So the next thing I did is I went ahead and configured EIGRP. So show run section router EIGRP. So I went ahead and configured EIGRP on the tunnel interface for each router. Show run section router EIGRP. And then again down here, show run section router EIGRP. So on his topology here, for example, he has routers 1, 2, and 3. Router 1 has another interface that would go to like a LAN interface. I point behind me because I always feel like I'm facing north. If I'm the router, I'm facing northbound. And this is a southbound interface, so it's behind me. And this would be the network that your PCs would connect to in a sample topology. And so it was 10.1.1.1, and it's a 24-bit mask. So on router 1, I went ahead and configured that as a loopback, show IP interface brief. I configured that as a loopback here with the 24-bit mask. And I went over to his router 2 and grabbed his southbound interface, and it is 10.1.1.2 with a 24-bit mask. And right then, I saw the problem. What's happening here is router 1, router 2, and router 3 show IP interface brief, excuse me. Show IP interface brief. Each have an interface. In this case, for me, it's a loopback, which is 10.1.1.1, 10.1.1.2, and 10.1.1.3. Okay. Now, if we check the mask for each of these, it's a 24-bit mask. It's a 24-bit mask, and router 1, of course, is a 24-bit mask as well. What that means is the same subnet actually resides on all 3 routers. All 3 routers actually are think that they're connected to the same subnet. So when I turned on EIGRP, I wanted to make sure I included that network. So show run section router EIGRP, And you'll notice I just did network 10. Since it is the only interface in the 10 address space, it will be the only interface included. Show run section router EIGRP. Same thing there, and the same thing here. Show run section router EIGRP. Okay, so I did turn it on. So if I come over to router 1 and do show IP route, I don't see any EIGRP learned routes, right? Because my tunnel interface is directly connected, so I'm not learning that via EIGRP. Or rather, I'm not installing it in my routing table because a connected route has a better administrative distance than what EIGRP offers. Our non-broadcast multi-access link is not participating in a routing protocol, so we're not learning that. That'll be via connected only. And the same thing with my simulated LAN interface, which is actually a loopback interface for me. I'm not learning this network 10.1.1.0/24 from the others because my directly connected interface has a better administrative distance than what EIGRP would provide. But we are actually learning this via EIGRP. So I kind of wanted to show that because here's a troubleshooting step that I couldn't get over Twitter properly. Show IP EIGRP topology. It's showing the 10.1.1.0/24 network via connected. Okay, but if we up arrow and we throw in all links, we see that we're actually learning this network via two neighbors and via connected. Okay. So they are actually advertising it to us, being the hub, R1 being the hub. Routers 2 and 3 are the spokes, are actually advertising this network up to the hub, but the hub's not installing it because the best path to reach that network is its own directly connected interface. And in the routing table, it's only going to install the best route. Okay. So how do we do this? How do we fix this problem? Well, my recommendation was, since he's just messing around in a lab and has routers 1, 2, and 3, I said just change the third octet to represent the interface number. So if we do interface loopback 0 and we do IP address 10.1.3, sure, we'll do .3, that's fine for router 3. And then we do conf t interface loopback 0, and we'll do IP address 10.1.2.2. Now we come over to router 1, which is our hub, and do a show IP route, and now we see we are, in fact, learning and installing our new prefixes. So that was pretty good. It was pretty good because when he sent me the configs and I looked them over, I was looking at the tunnel interface, and I was just, mentally verifying. I was like, okay, he's got a network ID, got a tunnel key, just making sure everything was matching up as it should. It turned off split horizon, and everything looked good. And it wasn't until I tried to incorporate the southbound interface, the LAN interface, was where I saw the problem. So that was a pretty fun little challenge. And that is just, I'm sort of like laughing to myself a little bit, because that is definitely sort of something that I catch myself doing in all of the CCIE labs and labs that I do, where you sort of form a tunnel vision around where you think the problem is, and everything looks right, but it doesn't work. So you swear it might be in this little tunnel, this tunnel vision that you have. And really, that's not the problem or where the problem is. The problem is outside of your, it's funny that we're talking about DMVPN, I'm talking about tunnel vision, but it's sort of outside of the tunnel that you're looking at. And really, the problem was a network address on another interface. So pretty neat little challenge. And And I hope that worked out for him. So that was pretty cool. Remember that all links command, show IP, EIGRP topology, all links. We'll show you all of the prefixes you're learning via EIGRP, even ones that don't satisfy, the feasibility condition. Okay? So I'm going to finish up here with a little rant, if you don't mind. Earlier in the day, I think there was a tweet also by Ernest the Cisco Panther, and said, is it better to do short-term contract work or something long-term for your career? I'm misquoting that a little bit. I'm just sort of summarizing the tweet. I'm trying to recall it from memory. And I said that my reply is going to be a little long-winded. And certainly wouldn't fit into a single tweet, and I don't like doing Twitter rants. So I'll do it here. So is it better for your career? Let me start off by saying, define what is better for your career. What does that actually mean? Does it mean the most rewarding career? The most like morally and ethically and heartwarming career you can have? Or does it mean money in your wallet, salary? And the reason I say this and I sort of have this point of view about it is, if you do short-term contract work, and we're talking 6 to 18 months, generally you can bounce from company to company, and each time you can get a small salary increase, as long as at each time you get to add something to your resume. Now, I know this because I know people who have done this, and I definitely don't approve of the method. In fact, there are many times that I have been asked to sit in on interviews for possible candidates at my own company, and I see a lot of work history in a short amount of time. I call those people job hoppers. Job hoppers are people that hop from job to job, and when they start listing some of the stuff that they do at each location, it's almost like you're like, wow, you can do all these things? That's amazing. But when you get down to it, what you realize is they did just enough at each location to add a bullet on their resume, but they didn't dig deep enough at any one thing to really be worth a damn. And when you move around so much, it's hard to dig deep. So there's two sides to this. There's two sides to this, right? If you're working for a contracting company and you're a contractor, sometimes your time up is when your contract is up, and that has no bearing on what your decision is in your career, right? When they say, hey, look, when this contract's up, your time here is up as well. That happens. In the world of contracting, it happens. But there are some people that do about 6 months to a year and a half at every company, and they just sort of bounce around. And whether the contract is up or not, they just bounce around, and they do it long enough to maybe go to a training. One of the things is you see people that always go to like vendor trainings, and then they add that to the resume. Vendor trainings typically that are offered typically are not very good trainings. Unless it's some sort of boot camp style training, where you're doing something for a week, for 40 hours. Normally you're just you're there long enough that you have to learn something. But if it's one of those one-day trainings where you get a certificate at the end, typically they're not worth that much. But those are things that job hoppers will put on their resume. Hey, I went and did this training. Hey, I went and did this training. Hey, I went and did this training. And when I'm looking at these resumes, I'm going, okay, well, tell me about it, and they know just enough of the marketing material, but not deep enough to be operational in anything. And, but again, I say, how do you define good for your career? If it's money in your wallet, each time a job hopper jumps from one job to another, typically they're going to negotiate their salary to be a little bit above what their last one was. And that means the more often you jump, the more salary increases you take. And it's it's definitely not black and white. It is an area of gray. And you just have to recognize those kind of people when you see them and kind of anticipate how deep their skill sets are. When you're with a good company, you stay with that company because it's good for you, it's good for your family. It's morally and ethically sound, and there's some good staying power there. Typically, there's personal growth and financial growth, and you don't need to job hop to make sure that they meet your financial needs and to make sure that they meet the needs of what you expect out of your career. So, definitely when you get locked into a company for a long period of time, there's an idea of maybe, you're locked in doing the same thing every day, and that can get boring. And I agree, definitely, if just sitting at the same desk doing the same thing every day is boring for my personality type. Some people prefer that sort of stability. I don't. I prefer the chaos. And fortunately, I work for a company where I get to sort of move from team to team, supporting any projects and efforts that we have where my skill set is needed. So it's not boring for me, and I don't just sit at a desk. But my company gives me staying power, I'm involved with projects that are challenging, and it enriches my lives and my life, my family's life, and enhances my skill sets. I'm here studying for CCIE. Everyone in the company knows it, and in support of what I do here. So it's just about finding what's the best decision for you. I definitely don't think I can answer one way or another, either taking short-term contracts or finding the right job and staying there for a long time. Not one is better than the other. It's what depends for you. It depends what's best for you. And some people don't mind job hoppers when they see them, and that's okay. There's no problem. Job hopping is fine if that's what you're happy with. Typically, I've been unimpressed with the skill sets of job hoppers. So it's up to you, whatever path you choose. That doesn't make it wrong. Like I said, it's an area of gray. It's definitely not black and white. Anyhow, that is my job hopping rant. I'm sorry if it didn't make sense for anyone out there, but those are my thoughts on it. Definitely just my own thoughts and based on my experiences alone. Okay, so that covers it. All right, good QoS studying, a great little DMVPN troubleshooting. I was actually really happy to dive into the DMVPN troubleshooting because I haven't really done DMVPN in a couple of weeks. And, I wanted to make sure I could stay sharp. And when I saw the config, and I knew in my head that config was right, but I couldn't prove why it didn't work, I had to lab it up and to prove that it didn't work. And this is part of that lab everyday movement. This is what you do. You lab it, you learn. You lab it, you learn. And then wrapping up with this. So that's it, guys. Tomorrow night will be Friday night. I'll do some more QoS review. I'll start standing up my lab for the weekend. I'm not sure which topology I'll burn through. I think maybe what I'll do is I'll try to do the last 3 tickets, or the tickets that I didn't complete on the Troubleshooting Lab 1 from the INE workbook, as well as try to stand up the Troubleshooting Lab 2. I don't know at which order I'll attack those. I'll update everyone tomorrow night. See ya.